Good evening, everyone. Here present and cozy at home. I hope in a great COVID-proof environment and with a Grand Cru glass of wine next to you, or maybe something sparkling, who knows? Because we do have something to celebrate tonight, the 150th birthday of de Groof Peterkam. Before I continue on our program, I have a little technical message to tell you. The best way to view this program is in the full screen mode of your computer or tablet. Then you can click the icon in the bottom right corner where you can choose then how you can listen to the show. You can choose the language, English, Dutch or French. But let's get back to the party tonight. It's not the first nor the last event in this festive year, and once again we hope to bring you another inspiring evening. And on the stage here of the Depot in Leuven, I will find myself tonight in the company of great international speakers. One of the best American interviewers of our times, the founding father of Wikipedia, and a man who helped the French government organize contact tracing during this pandemic. And also some outstanding members of the bank as well will be here tonight to talk about this evening's theme, and that is social entrepreneurship. Being more than a bank, de Groof Peterkam supports innovation, puts shoulder under entrepreneurship, forward-looking, remember the tagline, Imagine Tomorrow, drawing the attention to new opportunities, but also with a responsible attitude and a durable vision. So a lot to talk about later on with the CEO, Bruno Colman. So I would say, let's get started tonight. Our first guest is a man who knows when to listen, what to ask, and how to gain everyone's trust. By asking the right questions, he comes to the core of each and every one of his guests. What has life given them? Which lessons have they learned? Carl Calvin Fussman is a New York Times best-selling author, longtime Esquire writer, corporate consultant, and host of the Big Questions podcast. Among his guests were people like marketing guru Seth Godin, tennis star Maria Sharapova, but also Mikhail Gorbachev, Al Pacino, that would be great to put him here on scene once, Bruce Lee, Marie Kondo, and also the 46th President of the United States himself, Joe Biden. Tonight he will interview Jimmy Wales, the man we owe Wikipedia to. But first he will tell us about the lessons he has learned along the way of his journey. His motto being, if you change your questions, you can change your life. So that sounds very interesting. So please, ladies and gentlemen, sit back and enjoy Carl Fussman, all the way from New York, with a great hat, Mr. Fussman. Thank you for joining us tonight. I will give you the floor for the next 15 minutes, and then I'll come back to you. Drink a beer. That's Belgian beer.
That's Belgian beer. That's Belgian beer. That's Belgian beer. That's Belgian beer. And I got a whole lot more over there. In fact, a few years back, I once went to Belgium on a 3-day weekend with the idea being that I would try every beer in Belgium. And I got pretty close, paid some consequences, but I'm still smiling about it. So I thought, wow, these people are inviting me out to Belgium. I can drink some more beer. And I thought, who is behind this? And I heard about this company that has been around for 150 years, de Groof Peterkam. And so I started to look into it. And when I did, on the website, I saw something pretty interesting. It talked about the waves, peaks, and troughs that have always been part of their business. And then I scrolled down and I saw this magnificent sea turtle floating in the water, clear water. And I thought, okay, I ask questions. I tell stories. Let me tell you some stories about some questions. And the first one comes to a guy who is one of the world's best surfers. His name is Laird Hamilton. Now, Laird doesn't just surf ordinary waves. He surfs 50, 60-foot waves. They have to tow him out into the middle of the ocean. And then he finds just the right wave. He surfs it. And I asked him, Laird, what happens when you go down under a 60-foot wave? What do you do? And he said, I'll tell you what I do, Cal. First thing I do is I close my eyes. I don't even want to waste a second looking around. I don't want to waste that energy because that ocean is going to throw me around like a rag doll in a washing machine. Nothing I can do about it. I'm just going to let my arms go limp at the side and let it throw me around. But then he started to describe the ocean as a living being that it is. Waves go in, waves come out. Inhale, exhale. And he said, there's going to be a moment where the water is going to lighten up and I'm going to be able to feel it. And when I do, I know that is the moment to shoot straight to the surface. And I thought about that story because it's a pretty good analogy for where we are in this time of COVID. We've sort of been ragdolled around for a year, but now we can feel that lightness coming, and it's time to go straight to the surface. And when we do, we are going to find a world that is new and filled with possibilities. And I know that because of a story that goes back to touch upon that image of the turtle that I saw on the website. Right before COVID, I was asked to go on a tour. It's in Alaska, going through the glaciers, through the pure water, and it was thrown by an organization that was trying to clean up our oceans. And on this trip, on this boat, were many entrepreneurs, all with ideas on how to make the ocean healthier. There was one guy I met who had a company that could create live coral reefs. And I said to him, as a scientist, are you telling me that you could create the great coral reef the way it was before it endured the damage that it's been inflicted upon it? And he said, if you gave me the money and the time, I can do it. There was a woman on this trip who developed this technology to find every soda can that had been left in the ocean is just thrown away. And on this trip, these entrepreneurs told their stories. And there were quite a few financial people on the ship. And when they heard their stories, they decided to back every one of these entrepreneurs. And I knew in that moment, what it must feel like to have a great idea, to be executing on it, and to have somebody behind you. Somebody knows how to manage money, how to make a business work. Somebody who's in your corner. And that, I come to find out, is you, the Groff Peter Com. And so I see that your company has been around 150 years. It's seen many waves go up and down. And I just want to lift a glass to this company that is going to find great opportunities as we move forward, because it's time to head straight for the surface and see all the good stuff that's coming. So cheers. Now think about this. One of the guys I got to interview a while back, many, many years ago, was Jeff Bezos, founder of Amazon. And at the time, Amazon wasn't making much money. Every interviewer who went in to talk to him would ask this question: when's Amazon going to make money, Jeff? When's Amazon going to make money, Jeff? And his answers weren't very good. So when I went in to see him, I avoided that question. And there was a publicist at the table with us. And he's looking at me almost through squinty eyes. When's it coming? When's the question coming? When are you going to make money, Jeff? When's Amazon going to make money? And I didn't ask the question. And finally, the publicist said, all right, when are you going to ask it? When are you going to ask it? And I said, what? He said, when are you going to make money? And I said, sounds like Jeff's having a great time. I'm having a great time. I'm good. And Jeff started laughing. And in that moment, I realized that there was a moment where he was just getting started out, sitting in a garage filled with books. And he was kind of like the people that I was talking about on that ship. Great idea, just getting started, high hopes. And it was all about creation. And he started laughing because he knew I got it. The people who are changing the world have these great ideas that come from their heart, and hopefully down the road, they're going to make a lot of money. To give you an idea how far this can move ahead, just look at where Amazon is now and look at where US healthcare is right now. Amazon did an amazing thing. It put a product right in front of you on the computer. In fact, you could compare it with many other products. You could get a price, and then you could click a button that said, buy now. That was new back then. Now look at US healthcare. Probably a lot different than it is in Belgium. But when somebody goes into a hospital in the United States, they don't know how much it's going to cost. They're told, we'll send you the bill later. Now, think about that then. If I went to a bar and I asked for this Sowing DuPont, and I got it, and I drank it, and I was told, we'll let you know how much it's going to cost in 6 months. That would seem kind of crazy. But that's pretty much how our healthcare system is. Now, imagine what happens when Amazon jumps into that. When a company that can tell you what the product is, how much it costs, you click a button and you get it the next day. We're going to see all kinds of companies and technologies that can do amazing things to solve our problems. And they're going to be coming right in front of us as we all come to the surface. And so let me just conclude by offering another toast, because 150 years should be toasted a lot. But I'm going to toast that all of you, when you come up to the surface, you look around and you can find these people who are putting their hearts into companies, putting their great ideas into companies. And those companies are going to take the world forward. Maybe in a little town in Belgium, maybe across the United States. But I'm pretty sure if you're used to navigating those waves for 150 years, you're going to do great going forward. So it's my hope that next year, COVID is over, and I can be clinking glasses with you in person in Belgium at this conference. Thank you, and let's take it forward.
Thank you, Mr. Fussman. Thank you for that inspiring talk. I saw a picture of you with Nelson Mandela behind you. Was that one of the most important people or most inspiring people you ever met?
Yeah, and the beauty of it was that Muhammad Ali introduced me to him.
And I also see a writing by Mikhail Gorbachev.
And that was an amazing interview too. I'm going to tell that story tomorrow when I talk about the art of asking questions.
Okay, that's great. That's something to look forward to. Now you're going to ask some questions to Jimmy Wales, the founding father of Wikipedia. How often do you still use Wikipedia to get prepared?
I would say 5 times a day.
I recognize that. Well, I took a look at your wiki page. That's still pretty sober. Eh? Do you sometimes check it out yourself?
You know what? I'm always looking at other people's pages. I hardly ever check my own.
Have you ever met Jimmy Wales? Because you've met so many people by now.
No, and thank you so much for giving me this opportunity, because there's another example, a man who changed the world.
Yeah. The theme of this evening is sowing the seeds of social entrepreneurship. What do you expect yourself from that interview? What do you want to get to know about him?
I have some real needs that need to be solved. I mentioned healthcare in the United States having problems, and I realized that it's my duty to start a library that can help people navigate healthcare in the United States. I am not an inventor. I'm not a big guy on technology, but I'm hoping that Jimmy can plant a few seeds and give me an idea on how to pull that off.
Okay, but let's call him to the stage to plant those seeds here tonight so we can watch it. Please come and join me, Mr. Wales. The seat is yours, the floor is yours, and I hope you will enjoy the interview by one of the best for the next 30 minutes. I'll let you both do it, guys, and I'll come back in 30 minutes to see what happened here. Thank you very much. Go ahead.
Is it, if I look this way,
you can look any way you want to.
Any way I want.
The stage is yours.
Oh,
okay.
This is good.
Great.
Hey, how you doing?
Good, good. Nice to meet you.
I just made this connection. Waves, sea turtles, whale.
Yeah, there's a couple of memes online of Jimmy Wales with my face sort of on a whale in a harbor in the country of Wales. So it's kind of frightening, but there you go.
Well, you have an amazing backstory that I know because I looked it up on Wikipedia.
Great.
I'd like to know, going back to your early days, how the Encyclopedia Britannica influenced your life. This was a book, what you describe it.
Yeah, well, I mean, it was actually a bigger impact on my life was the World Book Encyclopedia.
I'm sorry.
Really,
there you go.
Yeah, it's an encyclopedia for kids, and my mother bought it from a door-to-door salesperson, which is what you did back in the late '60s, and grew up with it there in the house and loved reading it and poring over it. And in fact, they would send out every year, because it was just a set of books this big. They would send out the annual update. And with it, so let's say they updated the entry on the moon because people had landed on the moon, so they needed to write that. And so they sent out the annual update, but with little stickers. And you would go to the original encyclopedia and you would stick next to moon, it would say, check the 1974 update. And then you would go and check it. So that was I always joke, that was my first experience of editing the encyclopedia. So that updating was very slow back then.
What did that encyclopedia mean to you?
Well, I mean, what I really loved about it is this idea that, here's this enormous, I mean, back then, 26 volumes seemed enormous set of books, that anything you could think of, you could look it up, and it would be there. So whatever you're interested in. And that's always been my way. I love all kinds of random knowledge, and I'm always learning something new and exploring different things. Can't even tell you why often, but something strikes my fancy, and I go off and start learning about it. And so the encyclopedia, I think, kind of influenced me in that direction to say, oh, let's try to know about everything as much as we can anyway.
What were the steps between that moment as a child where you were putting the sticker in and the start of Wikipedia?
Well, quite a lot of steps in between. I would say there were a lot of influences. I grew up in Huntsville, Alabama, which is in the deep South, so you wouldn't necessarily think of it as a place like Silicon Valley. It's not, you wouldn't think, known for technology, but it's where the Space and Rocket Center is, and it's where the NASA rocket science went on. And so when I was a small child, we lived close enough to where they were testing the Saturn V rockets that it would rattle the windows. You would hear the rumbling and the windows would rattle in the house. And so that was quite impactful. It was all very exciting with the space program, and that was like our hometown sports hero. So it was all about technology and science and things like that, and that's what we were, as kids, we were all, massively excited by. So that was, a part of it. My uncle was an entrepreneur and had the first computer store in town. So I worked there as a kid, worked after school and on the weekends. He taught me the very early basics of programming. This is even before the IBM PC came out. So these are the old Commodore PET computers that he sold. So I had that early sort of introduction to technology, and that early introduction as well to entrepreneurship, the idea that, hey, you could start your own thing rather than just get a job at a big company. So those were some of the influences. Obviously, lots of different things happened along the way.
Well, let me stop you right there, because I'm wondering, are entrepreneurs born? Are they made? Is it a hybrid?
I think it has to be a hybrid. It has to be a hybrid. I do think, you can encourage in children a more, I would say, entrepreneurial mindset. Or let me put it this way, because I think entrepreneurship is, in many ways, it's the playfulness of childhood that hasn't been crushed out of someone. So I'm not sure you can encourage it in a child, but you can certainly destroy it in a child by forcing them to think in a very rigid way and forcing them and kill their creativity and so forth. But you can let it flourish, and you can encourage it, and you can give them that inspiration. But I also think, I often say to people, I'm very fortunate in a way to have become successful, because I would make a very terrible employee. I get up every day and I do whatever I think is the most interesting thing to do. I've organized my life around that. And so actually, interestingly, I don't work day to day in any of the organizations that I've set up. I'm a terrible manager. What I'm best at is, I would say, coaching, leadership from talking about the ideas and the big vision of here's what we're trying to accomplish, and let's think about the principles by which we would get there. I'm not so great at, sort of supervising people's work and things like that. But actually, it works out really well because I believe if you've set a vision that's exciting for people, you don't have to supervise their work. They just do. They do the thing because it's an amazing thing and it's worth doing. Anyway.
Was there a moment that you had the idea for Wikipedia? And I know it was steps, but was there a certain moment where you knew this is going to work and this is going to be huge?
So, yeah, a couple things I can say about that. So first of all, I often describe myself as a pathological optimist. And what I mean by that is I always think everything's going to be great. And so at least I know this about myself. So I find it important to surround myself with people who are like, oh, but Jimmy, have you thought of this problem? Have you thought of that problem? No, I haven't, because I think everything's going to be great and let's just go for it and do it. And so it's good, but it obviously has some problems. But also, I would say, in terms of that moment, 2 years before starting Wikipedia, I set up a project called Newpedia, same vision, free encyclopedia, open source licensing, but really didn't know how to make it happen. So organized it. We made a 7-stage review process to get anything published. It was very top-down, very old school, and that didn't work. It didn't work because it wasn't very fun for the volunteers. It was quite intimidating to participate because, anything you wrote, they were going to send to the most prestigious professors they could find to review and critique it. And it's like felt like the bad part of being in grad school or something. But then once I sort of downloaded some wiki software and installed it on the server, and quite famously, I typed the first words of Wikipedia, which were "Hello World," and hit save, and that was the beginning of it. And then in 2 weeks' time, we had as much work done as we had in almost 2 years before, because opening it up and just saying to everyone, we had a great community around the encyclopedia project because people thought it was inspiring. This idea of a free encyclopedia online at that moment in time, people thought, that sounds like a great idea, we should do that. But the system we'd set up prevented them from doing it. As soon as we freed them and said, no, just start writing. Let's just get going. We've got this collaboration tool. Everybody just jump in and start editing things. We'll make up the rules as we go along. We'll figure out how to do this. And it just exploded. I'd say we had, within a few weeks' time, we had a few hundred articles. It just grew and grew and grew from there.
Did you always have the financial backing to make it work?
Well, no. I mean, that's the interesting thing. So I had a small business, internet. I was internet entrepreneur, had a search engine web directory kind of thing, and made some revenue. Had a few employees, but Wikipedia in many ways is really a child of the .com crash. And in fact, I think, ironically, had it not been for the .com crash, Wikipedia might not have become what it has become, because what happened, there was that moment in time when it started to grow. And it started to grow. And of course, when anything's growing and you've got a community, there'll be some problems that pop up. And if I had had the funding, if I had been able to go to a venture capitalist who were not, everything was shut down because it was the depth of a crash. If I had, and they said, yeah, great idea, Jimmy, here's $10 million to go and build this. Well, as soon as you see a problem on the website, you think, okay, well, we've got to hire some moderators. We've got to hire some staff to edit things, to supervise things. And instead, because there was no money, we had to really think hard about, okay, how are we going to do this as a community? How are we going to develop the institutions and rules and processes so that this community of volunteers can manage itself? And that innovation came about really because there was no money. I think, if you just have a problem and you throw money at it, you might actually miss the real innovation that could happen without money. So that was a pretty big deal, that we had to figure it out as we went along. And I remember we had gotten to a point, this is about in 2003, it was Christmas Day, and we were running on 3 servers, and 2 of the servers crashed on Christmas Day. And so fortunately, traffic is quite low on Christmas because everybody's doing Christmas, but I was like, oh, this is a big problem. So I was scrambling, I got everything running on 1 server, but it was quite slow. And that was when I really realized, okay, yeah, we have to get some money. Like we could use 8 servers. So we did our first fundraiser soon after that, and I was hoping to raise $20,000 in a month's time, and we had raised $30,000 in just like a week and a half. So it was a huge success, that first fundraiser, and it gave us that inkling of, oh, actually, you know what? Maybe we could do this without ever having to have advertising. We could do this by just getting support from the public to say, hey, we've got this interesting thing. If you love it, chip in a bit. Of course, now we call that crowdfunding, but nobody called it that back then. But
is it much easier now to start a business like that?
I think it is. I think it is and it isn't, right? So there are those who would say, well, back then the number of competitors and everything is much bigger now, and you've got these behemoth companies out there doing things, and how are you going to possibly compete with them? Okay, fair enough, but the truth is big companies are never that nimble. They can try to be, they can be quite brilliant, right? But nimble, that doesn't really play in. They've got really smart people, they have a great idea. It takes them 6 months to execute what 2 or 3 people can just do tomorrow because they don't have anybody stopping them, sort of from the finance and accounting departments. And these days as well, it's become very, very easy and very, very cheap with the cloud services to launch a small, innovative little web project. So if you're a programmer, you can do stuff now. You can set up something, today using serverless technologies that will scale to near infinity without you having to change anything. Whereas a huge part of my early days in Wikipedia was actually figuring out, oh, we've only got 3 servers. What if one of them goes down? Oh, how are we going to afford 8 more servers? Whereas now it's much more granular, right? You can just start and it's all hosted. I mean, I literally would go into the data center with a screwdriver and servers and shove them in the racks and screw the screws in and get cut the Ethernet cables and hook them all up in a network and so on. Had to physically do all of that. Whereas now you just, you go on AWS or Azure or any of the cloud services, and you just go, yep, I'll take a server or I'll take a container. It's kind of amazing for people who want to get started at a small scale with an interesting idea. And we've seen this. A lot of small apps have come up from some surprising places, which is exciting for me to see. And they're able to build quite a big thing. And they didn't need $10 million to buy servers. They just needed, to get started and get rolling.
Do you think, and this goes back to your point about the timing of Wikipedia, where the economy was down, after COVID, that there's going to be an explosion of all new ideas?
I absolutely do. Yeah. I mean, I actually think and I think this isn't just my opinion. I think there's some serious academic research that suggests that starting a new business in a recession tends to be more successful than in a boom. Which is counterintuitive, but turns out to be true in many cases. And what are the reasons for that? I mean, one reason is, yeah, those big companies in a recession, they're not really, they're just trying to keep themselves going, right? They're not really able to go, oh yeah, we'll throw $5 million at that idea because we're rolling in it. If they're having things a little tight, they're like, no, we've got to stick to our core business. We've got to, that means all those little opportunities open up for smaller players. But also when you have any kind of a disruption in the economy, and this one is huge, just a complete change. I've literally never sat on a stage being interviewed by someone, I don't even know where you are. Don't even care, right? You're just coming to me magically from the internet somewhere.
Yeah.
Belgium. No, I'm in Belgium. I don't know where you are.
That's the crazy thing.
Yeah, it's the crazy thing. But everybody's gotten used to being on Zoom or Google Hangouts or whatever. So we're going to be able to work remote in a way that we haven't in the past. Of course, a lot of people are really itching to get back to the office, and a lot of people are saying, I'm done. Like, I realize now offices are terrible. I actually like working from home. So that's a huge transformation that's happened, like that, that's not going to completely go away, right? A lot of things have changed. So I'm really interested in that kind of thing, and I'm actually developing, just because I never stop. I consider my personal self-identity is entrepreneur, not founder of Wikipedia. I mean, founder of Wikipedia I'm quite proud of, but really I'm an entrepreneur, and so I'm nearly about to launch quiznightbeyond.com. So it's an app where you can go and play fun quizzes, but with your friends, and they're all on video, right? And so it's kind of an obvious idea. Everybody's on video. I don't know, my family, we've been doing quizzes with each other during lockdown with my elderly parents. And I was like, well, let's just build an app to do that. And I think it's quite fun. And who knows, it might or might not be successful. I have many unsuccessful ideas, but I think it's kind of cool and fun. And I think there's a lot of that kind of stuff where you see a big break in society, something big shifts, i.e. the invention of the web or COVID-19 hits, and a lot of bad things come out of that. But suddenly a lot of interesting new things can happen. Like we open our minds and we go, okay, hey, actually, we didn't think of doing this in this way in the past. So, when I'm hearing you talk about those entrepreneurs on the ship, with new kind of ideas about doing something for the ocean, I guarantee you more than half of those ideas sounded kind of cool and interesting, but won't work. That's the nature of entrepreneurship. It's like if you could put 50 smart people on a boat and all 50 ideas are genius and work, that's going to be the most amazing boat trip in the history of the world. That's just never happened, right? But some of them are going to work, some of them are not. And that's kind of the exciting thing about change and transformation that I think we're about to go through because of the end of the COVID era.
Did you recognize when COVID hit that this is the time to just sit back and think, much like the way Laird Hamilton approaches life under 60 feet of water?
Yeah. Well, not right away. So this is the interesting thing. So I was supposed to be here, I don't know exact dates, but about a year ago. And this conference, like many others, got canceled or postponed. So actually for my first few weeks, I sat at home. All my future trips were canceled. I said, that's okay. I always work from home or I work from wherever I am. But I suddenly realized it's like, actually, more than half of my actual work, i.e. going to speak in conferences, traveling, planning, writing, thinking, learning about the client so I can do a good job and so on, that suddenly was gone. So I sat there and I worked and answered all my emails and so on and so forth. And then I was like, you know what, this is kind of like, I'm doing things that I don't need to be doing, and I'm doing things that I wouldn't normally do that aren't actually, there's no plan to it or something. So that's when I kind of pulled back and I'm like, okay, hold on. It's time to just think. Like, let's just have ideas. I'm going to sit at home for a year. Let's think about new concepts, new ideas. And one of the techniques I have, which is I recommend it to people. So I work a lot in Keynote, so like Microsoft PowerPoint, but it's the Mac Keynote. And this isn't the perfect tool for this, but it's just the tool I know because I've been giving speeches for a long time. And I have this presentation called Crazy Ideas. And anytime I come up with a crazy idea, which is quite often, I try not to self-censor. I just open up my laptop, or it's usually already open. I open up this, and I make a new slide, and I'm like, here's the idea, here's the business model, or here's how it could work. And then I try to stop there, right? And just come back a few days later. And when I come back a few days later, I often find, yeah, that was a really, really bad idea. That was quite dumb. But other ones I'm like, oh, actually, now that's interesting. And now I have a refinement on it, or I have something else I can think about there. And I don't have the time or the capital to sort of pursue all of them. But I think it's a great process, because I think a lot of people who are trying to innovate just do way too much self-censorship at the beginning. They immediately start thinking of all the reasons why it won't work. And I feel like when you find yourself doing that, hey, don't completely not do that. You have to sort of be rational and take a look and go, actually, here are the reasons why this idea turns out wouldn't work. But if you start with that, you're just going to kill everything, because you can come up with an idea why, it's like, oh, Wikipedia, like, yeah, but what if people put in bad information? Okay. Yeah, but if I stopped there and said, yeah, people might put in bad information, we never would have kind of solved that problem or made progress on it. So avoiding that kind of self-censorship for me is really, really important.
As you were talking about that, and I love that idea, I was reminded of the way Quincy Jones writes music. The crazy idea would come in his mind, he'd hear it, and he would just make a note of it, and then he'd leave it alone. And he wouldn't go back to it. But if it kept coming back to him, he would say, all right, no way I'm getting out of this. Let's go.
Yes, I think that's great. That's a great story.
What are some of the other ideas you had in this year of crazy ideas?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of stuff around video. I had the idea of, like, what if you just had, it's like Zoom, but anybody can pop on. You pop on and it's 16 random people in a room together, and you're going to discuss some idea. And anybody can just come and show up. And I thought for like 5 minutes, I thought, that's a great idea. Put it in my crazy ideas. Then the next day I'm like, yeah, but trolls will come. Like, there's a lot. Like, that just doesn't work. Like, you've got to have some kind of way of actually making it be healthy and making it be good. Gosh, I can't even remember. I haven't opened up that spreadsheet or that presentation in a little while, but I've got about 25 of them. We'll see if anybody makes any of them.
Would there be a way for a company to optimize that idea? Because they could control the people that get in.
Yeah, I mean, I think there is something. I actually think there's something really, really interesting around this shift to video. That everybody's used to doing Zoom on their laptop. We're a bit exhausted by it in many cases, but and just thinking, okay, what are the kinds of things that you might do that would be different, that would be interesting? What kind of fun things could you do that aren't just? I mean, if you think about Zoom, which is a fantastic piece of software, but it's I don't think I'm offending anyone at Zoom by saying it's quite a boring piece of software, right? It's just it's a perfectly well done sort of conference, and you can get on with multiple people, and you can share notes and do your presentations and whatever. But is it fun? And is it the only thing? Is that I feel it's like the first step to what could we do by bringing people together in new ways on video. And maybe they're strangers. Maybe they're, you can imagine a lot of ideas just come to mind. Dating, would that work? Might do, actually. Could be kind of interesting. You could have a first date Zoom. But if it's just sitting there staring at someone you don't know on Zoom, that's probably not going to, you got to have some icebreakers. You got to have something that people are doing, some activity. And so I don't know. I think a lot about those kinds of things, and I'm really interested in exploring them. Quite far afield from my normal work, but is it? It's just trying to think of because, by the way, let me. This is what I want to say. For the last year, every Sunday afternoon, we do family quiz on Zoom. My mom comes, my dad comes, all my brothers and sisters, the grandkids, they poke in a little bit, but it's really the grown-ups. We take a turn making the questions, and I think a lot of families are doing this. And I see my brothers and sisters once a week, and I hadn't for a long, long time. I mean, we talk on our family WhatsApp and so on. And I just think, okay, let's now talk about when we talk about social networking. And I used to think social networking was my sister posts a picture of her dog on Instagram and I click like. And that's the weakest possible social interaction. It's like, great dog, sister. Now we actually get together, and like mom and dad are getting older, and so we actually were just talking before I came out here. We're gonna have a meeting to talk about their health, and thinking about the future for mom and dad. And we're able to do that because we're now used to, we talk to each other once a week, every week. In a light context. And I think that's really interesting because we've been through this era where the idea of a social network is a very thin and very poor kind of socializing. And now, although video is not the same as a hug, I'd love to go and give my mom a hug. But hey, you know what? I see her on video, we chat every day, we joke around, and that's so much better than what we were doing for the few years before. So that's one of the hidden blessings, I would say, of COVID, is that I think a lot of families have had more interaction actually with the seniors, just because you realize, like we can just get on Zoom and we can't go visit. We were gonna go visit once a month. Actually, now we can do a Zoom once a week, and that's kind of amazing.
As you're talking, I'm remembering years back when I was doing these columns for Esquire magazine. They were called What I've Learned, with icons over the last 75 years. And there was one time where 2 interviews were booked on the same day on opposite sides of the country. And I said to the editor, how about I do one in person, and then I have time to do the other one on Skype? And the editor said, no, we can't let you do that. It has to be in person. You're taking away the essence of a person-to-person meeting. And you know what I've discovered? We are closer now. I am like 6 inches away from you than if I was in the same room.
Yeah, but also your head is about 6 feet tall for me. So that's kind of interesting as well. When I meet you, I'll be like, he's not as big as I thought. That was an enormous giant of a man.
So what happens to print going forward, given where you're visualizing the visuals?
Yeah, no, I mean, I think there's all kinds of interesting things that are happening and that will continue to happen. So, yeah, who knows?
Will we as a society be as linked to words on a page as we've been in the past? Or are we going to move to visuals? And you know what? I need to know this because I want to create a library.
Well, no, I actually think words are going to remain incredibly important and incredibly powerful. I can sit here and chat with you and tell a story that I've been thinking about, and in some ways that's richer than if I wrote it. But if I wrote it, I could consider every word. I could really think it through, particularly for ideas, for learning, for education. I think it's incredibly powerful. Also, for us in the wiki world, collaboration on video is really hard. If you film something and then I look at it and I say, well, it would have been a little better had you put a light there. It's too late. I can't fix that. If you write something in the encyclopedia and I say, oh, it actually would have been a little better had you given that quote from that other source, we can work together on that and we can edit it. It's very fluid. You can continuously improve it in a way that's harder for video. But I think, text is really important. But I do think, I think what's really interesting is we've had video forever. Not forever. Television was invented when television was invented, and so on and so forth. And I remember, I used to joke about this. I remember I felt like we invented all the technology again in reverse. So the first time I saw a movie, I don't know, it was probably an MP4 or something, playing on a computer, I was like, this is amazing. We've reinvented the television, right? And then it was a few years later that Skype, I did a voice call on Skype, not video, just voice call on Skype. And I'm like, amazing, we've invented the telephone. So we're kind of going backwards in a way. But actually, what is new is the video's been with us for a long time, but the interactive video where you get sort of 10 people together and you can see each other and you're video conferencing. That's actually pretty new. I mean, it technically has existed. I don't know, well, Skype started doing it. I don't know when Google Hangouts. But really, it's become a cultural thing that we're all comfortable with, and we know, and we know some of the problems with it. There's a certain, I always think in terms of, maybe you call it design language, but it's more like behavioral language. Like, what does it mean to be on a conference call with 8 people? And, you know, in the early days, it's all like, you're on mute. You know, well, for me, it's still that way most of the time. I start talking and everybody's like, you're on mute. And I'm like, okay, not very good at computers. Hold on. But, you know, you come to a certain rhythm for that medium. And that's different. That's new. And I think it's a great thing to explore.
I'm going to leave you with one last question, because you seem like such a curious guy. On a scale of 1 to 10, where is your curiosity at right now?
Oh, I mean, 10. I mean, I'm fascinated. I mean, the thing is, this is a sort of a personal thing. I had a friend who passed away just a few years ago, another entrepreneur friend of mine. And I just think, wow, like he didn't get to see coronavirus, right? And that's, I mean, that's, it's a weird thought. I'm sorry, it's a personal thought. But when I think about the future, I'm like, I really, really want to stay healthy, because I'm really curious what's going to happen in the next 10 years, next 20 years. I'm 54, so I figure I've only got about 100 more years, and I gotta make the most of them. I'm very curious what's going to happen.
I can't think of a better way to end this conversation.
Brilliant.
Only to hope that I meet you 100 years from now.
Yeah, and we'll have a Belgian beer.
There you go.
Thank you.
Thank you. It's great, Jimmy.
Great.
Thank you both. Thank you for the inspiring questions, Cal. And maybe indeed next time you should just come over and we'll grab the beer together.
Yes.
Jimmy, I see you tomorrow morning, bright and shining for our next session. Thank you very much.
Great. Bye-bye.
And now, ladies and gentlemen, let's take a closer look at tonight's theme, social entrepreneurship, and bring it closer to home. How can technology support citizen entrepreneurship? Our next guest has accumulated a lot of experience in that field. Paul Douan is co-founder of Base Impact, a technological non-profit organization aiming to create a new generation of public services around the world. And his organization developed a number of tools with great impact, like Bob, we have to say a job approaching coaching app that helped 280,000 seekers in France alone. Or Conotify, that's a private by design contract tracing website, which helped the French government notify more than 1 million people potentially infected by COVID-19. We need a Conotify ourselves, I think, from time to time. De Groof Petercam had an eye on Paul Douan for quite some time now and awarded him last year with the De Groof Petercam Foundation Award. So he could not be absent here tonight. He will be challenged by Sylvia Stijssel, and Sylvia is the managing director of the De Groof Petercam Foundation. It's an organization founded in 2008 aiming at supporting social innovations for employment. Each year, a new project is supported with 1 million euros. That's quite nice. And even better, 5 years of continued support. Sylvia and the foundation firmly believe in creativity and innovation, especially when it has a positive impact on society. So I would like to invite them both here to the stage. Please join me, Paul Douan and Sylvia Stijssel. That's your seat. Looking forward to your questions, and I see you in a couple of minutes. Thank you.
Thank you.
So hello, Paul.
Hi.
So we know each other quite well now, since you were the laureate of the De Groof Petercam Foundation Awards last year in April. So what does it mean to you 1 year after?
Well, look, our mission at Base Impact is to create a world where citizens can create the public services they want to see exist. I mean, obviously, it's very ambitious. We struggle to do it every day. When we build out our technologies like Bob, Notify, or a few others, I can expand on that later. But every day is kind of a challenge, and there's a lot of risk that's involved with having this ambitious vision. We are working on technology where we don't even know if it's going to work, and I think this is actually why we need to do this, because we want to solve hard problems, and we think that it's important that people try to have impact as opposed to just try to make billions. But that requires a lot of risk taking, and when we do innovation, the risk is part of it. And I think it's quite rare to have foundations that that can support this type of risk taking and all the. When you come to someone and say, okay, I have this idea for an impactful project, maybe it's going to work and it's going to impact millions of people, or maybe we'll invest $500,000 in R&D and it's not going to work, or maybe it's going to work, but we're going to have to pivot at some point in the middle, and it looks nothing like what we wrote in a grant application. So that's the type of thinking that's still quite new, and I mean, it's not just to say good things about the foundation, but I believe that the Groove Petercam Foundation is one of the few in the world where foundations that understand this type of innovation funding in the nonprofit space. There's only a few others, like I'm not necessarily going to mention them all, but we can really count them on the fingers of a hand.
Okay. So, Paul, of course, you were selected because the technology you created is quite stunning, but mainly thanks to your vision of society, and more precisely, how you envision public services. And at a time where governments and public structures are under pressure and face some mistrust, it's nice to hear how you envision public services of tomorrow.
Yeah, so the way we think about it is something we call citizen-led public services. We believe that it should be easier for citizens to create and scale social innovation. In a nutshell, what's happening today is we do see there's a crisis in traditional public services that can have trouble keeping up with how society evolves. We see this particularly in times of crisis, like with COVID, where I think by and large we can all agree that there's this feeling that well, the government doesn't necessarily have all the answers, which is not a bad thing. It's not a criticism. It's just a feature of how things work. And the problem here is that when you look at where innovation happens, it tends to happen mostly with venture capitalist-backed innovations in Silicon Valley that are going to see these opportunities for disruption. And these are the innovations that tend to work out. But there's actually a saying in Silicon Valley that says that the best way of predicting the future is to create it. And the question here that we're seeing more and more is this the future that we want? Now we're starting to see that Facebook has a huge impact on information and on bias. We see that this technology that we thought was just technology is actually very critical. We see that today healthcare systems tend to be more and more private. There's a lot of innovation happening, which on the surface is good, but you don't know if the long-term consequences are all that good. And here, what we believe in is that there should be a way to put this innovation towards a greater good. In short, we need more Wikipedias and maybe fewer Facebooks, or at least we need a way for citizen entrepreneurs to say, okay, I want to create the next Wikipedia. A few years ago, there was a whole generation of entrepreneurs whose goal was to create the next unicorn and become the next Mark Zuckerberg. I think it would be great if we have the next generation that would be the next Jimmy Wales, for example.
Yeah. And so, concretely speaking, you are a social entrepreneur tackling problems that are faced by public services. Can you give us an example on how you do that every day?
Yeah, so to give an example here, so we've developed a methodology to create, well, citizens create innovation, and then we are able to scale that up by partnering up with governments and NGOs. So we're really trying to have the best of both worlds here. So we mentioned Notify before. It's a contact tracing alternative app, so it doesn't work with Bluetooth or tracing, so there's no privacy issue here. what we saw as citizens, we saw COVID hit. We saw there was a huge problem in being able to track and break chains of contamination. And we kind of thought, okay, well, it's great that the government, most governments are going super deep on doing all this fancy technology for Bluetooth-based contact tracing. But personally, we didn't really believe in it, which is fine. But we're like, okay, well, let's try to think about what we can do and see if it works. And what we identified was that there is a process that works for contact tracing. It's the humans who make calls. It can last half an hour. They will actually run investigation. If you're COVID positive, they're going to call you and help figure out who you may have contaminated, and then they will notify them. And that's a process that works, but it's really difficult to scale because, as I mentioned, these calls can take half an hour each. And so we're like, okay, well, let's just digitize the contact tracing interview and package that into a very nice app with a nice user experience that everyone can do in 5 minutes, and maybe it can integrate with the data on your phone so that you don't have to retype everything. So that technology we built completely independently on our own funds. It took us only 3 people in a month, and then we built it, and we released it in May of last year. We were able to notify by ourselves tens of thousands of potential at-risk people. And then when the second wave hit of COVID, because there was, if you remember, there was this whole summer when we kind of thought that it was just COVID was already gone. When the second wave hit, contaminations were through the roof, and the health insurance systems were having trouble keeping up with the exponential growth of the virus. And so here we were able to strike a partnership with the Assurance Maladie, so the national health insurance system in France, where every time that you get a positive PCR test, you'll get the text from the insurance system inviting you to create your at-risk contact list through Notify, and through that we've been able to notify more than 1.5 million people, which is 10 times more than the official government app. And I think here it's a great example of how we think that citizen entrepreneurs can kind of de-risk things, and I think this is also where philanthropy can play a role. We can try new things. We have the freedom to experiment, to maybe fail. But in the event that we are onto something, or we may have a promising way of creating impact, then we think here there should be a way for these promising innovations to be scaled up by partnering up with governments that tend to have the skill, but maybe not have the agility. And so instead of having these two worlds that kind of oppose each other, where we say, okay, the startup people want to disrupt government, let's create a world where people can work together. And this is really what it's about.
Okay. And maybe in a world what you're doing for employment through Bob?
Yeah, and for Bob, so same thing here. We built technology that is an AI coaching tool that can automatically, given the labor market data and the collective expertise of human coaches, deliver a personalized coaching plan for people who are looking for a job, and deliver them the right advice and the right content at the right time. And so that's a system that we built a few years ago. We have been able to coach around 300,000 people who are unemployed in France, and we've gotten great results with that. So there's 40% of people who expressed that they found a job, and that's thanks to some of the advice that we gave them. And here the beautiful thing is that it's something that can really scale. So we're a very small team at Baze. We're 15 in total. And with these 15 people in total, we've been able to coach 300,000 people. And now with COVID, we're actually in touch with many governments who are interested in scaling that up as well. For example, in the United States, where they have tens of millions of job seekers, but they don't really have the infrastructure to coach them in place, because they don't have as much of a tradition of public employment services as we do here in Europe. And so here as well, it's something we kind of started from scratch. It was very important for us to have this freedom to experiment. We tried dozens of different ideas. A lot of them didn't work. And then we really realized that if we were to kind of flip the idea of employment coaching on its head, it's not, you don't have to see the experts at the employment center. Maybe everyone can have this information delivered to them. Maybe that could work. And And so after a few years of trial and error and experimentation, and now that we've seen that it works, now it's ready to be scaled up through these partnerships.
Okay. So, of course, you are involved as a social entrepreneur. You are in the business world. You know technology very well and the challenges of society. And today, it's very actual to question the social responsibility of entrepreneurship and private companies. So many young and less young entrepreneurs and innovators cannot imagine doing business without doing good. How do you react to that?
I mean, I think it's a great thing. Up until recently, especially in Silicon Valley, there was everyone was saying, "Okay, I'm changing the world by building this new social media app or whatever." And I think now it's become kind of a joke. But there was a point where people actually believed in it, and we're starting to see that it's actually more of a dystopia than necessarily desirable future. Here, I would say there's two things. One thing is it's great. We're starting to have conversations, for example, about how if you do a food delivery app, for example, are you actually doing good? You can say, yeah, it's good, especially in times of pandemic. It's useful, but maybe you're also exploiting worker rights, especially for marginalized immigrant populations who you kind of exploit as your delivery people. And so here, yes, you definitely need to have this conversation and to have this thought process about okay, is this responsible? What am I doing here? So it can be for worker rights, it can be for the environment, and so I think this is very important to have this responsibility in mind. But the other thing I want to say is that it's also very, very important to avoid impact washing. There's this whole trend now that has become fashionable to say I'm also doing impact of nonprofits. I just have this sugarcoat of impact here. Well, for example, you can have Deliveroo or Uber say, we're a for impact organization. We create economic opportunity for in poor neighborhoods. And you really have to dig deeper into, is that true, or on balance you do more good than you do harm, and I think it is really important to avoid this type of impact washing and to encourage more genuine, authentic entrepreneurs who really have impact in mind as a first thought. And I think maybe to elaborate a tiny bit on that. There's this whole saying about, okay, we want to have a double bottom line, we can do impact and profit. I think it's true that they're not contradictory, but I do think that you need to think about which one comes first. And if you're optimizing for profit while trying to minimize harm, I mean, it's one thing. I also believe that there's a whole other group of entrepreneurs that should be supported, that want to do impact first and foremost, and then while they're trying to maximize for impact, they're trying to figure out how to make this organization work. And actually, I think that Jimmy's presentation just right before is a good example of that. Right, they had to figure out how to make do with no financial means, and this is what actually helped create what Wikipedia is today.
Yeah. So, Paul, as you know, the Degroof Petercam Foundation funds social innovators like you, and we know how hard it is to find them and how precious they are, and that there are not too many out there. So you started from young on, you were 21 when you started. What would be your advice to those willing to innovate for the social good and might be hesitating? So it's not an easy task, right? What would be your golden piece of advice?
I'm probably still too young to really give advice, but probably if I had known how difficult doing Bayes would be, I may not have done it. And I didn't have like this aha moment to create Bayes. Just I come from an immigrant family. We did benefit from public service. I always wanted to find a way to give back. And it just so happened that I was lucky enough to land in Silicon Valley at a very young age. Started working there at 19, and I was a data scientist in some of the cool startups of the time. And it's great. You make a lot of money. You work on interesting stuff. But what was clear to me was this discrepancy between what I was seeing like on the street, you have a ton of homeless people in Silicon Valley. There's a ton of inequality. So I was trying to do volunteer work in the evenings to see what I could do to help. So that was my evenings, and then during the day, everyone's talking about, oh, we're changing the world by doing new fraud detection algorithms that touch millions of people. And it was crazy how there was a disconnect between my day work, where I was trying to drive innovation, use innovation to drive profits, and code I wrote actually touched millions of customers. But at night, I felt like I was just a drop in the bucket. I can only help like one person at a time, and I don't feel like I'm really helping the system being better. And so that's kind of where the idea for Base Impact came from. I was like, okay, I need to do something. I don't know what the idea is, actually. I don't even think I'm a born leader. I had this idea that leaders were alpha type people, who get up at 6 in the morning, do 5 in the morning, write their emails on the treadmill, whatever the stereotype in Silicon Valley is. And just one thing led to another, and turns out we were onto something that's quite important. And the first people who really helped and changed the lives of, that thanked us was like, wow, this is what I want to do for the rest of my life. And maybe there's one golden piece of advice. It's I guess the power is not where you think it is. I had this really this clear idea of what a leader is, and I didn't think it was me. But in reality, because we were doing things our own way, I think it was actually a lot more authentic. And because we were a lot more authentic, we ended up creating something that was very powerful. We ended up finding and recruiting top talent who used to work to gain $500K a year at Google, and now they want to do impact work for a small fraction of the salary. We were able to get access to presidents when we work with governments to support the work. And I think part of it is because we didn't have anything to sell. We're just like, hey, no, we're just people wanting to do good stuff. And I think that precisely came from the fact that we were not the usual suspects for doing that kind of stuff.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Paul. We are very happy to have you on board the foundation. Thanks for this conversation.
Thank you both. Also, Sylvia, for asking those great questions. Thank you both very much for joining us here tonight. Thank you.
Thank you.
Time now to introduce our last but not least guest for tonight. Since we're here to celebrate the 150th birthday of the bank, its CEO could not be missing here tonight. So please, my final guest, Bruno Colmont, please join me here on stage as CEO of the Degroof Petercam. Congratulations with the birthday party.
Thank you.
In the light of the 150th anniversary, let's have a moment of reflection on the whole idea of social entrepreneurship. But before we tackle the topic, maybe first take a look at what happened here tonight. We had a lot of international guests, and the last one was Paul Duan. How did they inspire you tonight?
Well, I think we had tonight the opportunity to meet with amazing people. I was quite amazed, flabbergasted by the speeches. And I think that the focus on social entrepreneurship is very important. It's not a word, it's a reality today. And when I see the Wikipedia project, it's amazing. It was created 20 years ago or something. And today it's being used by almost everybody on Earth. Which means that there is more than just making business with money. There is also the transfer of knowledge, of understanding, of pedagogy, of all these things. And I was quite impressed, honestly.
What do you think of what Paul Duan just said here? We need more people like Jimmy Wales rather than more people like Mark Zuckerberg.
Well, I think his concept is to say that we have to bring something to the community rather than to make profit out of the community. That's a project. And he thinks also that public services should be maintained rather than being taken over by the private sector. And that's a big difference, because if you take a look at the Wikipedia project, you see that definitely the idea was to entertain the worldwide knowledge. And that's amazing, because knowledge could be priced, could be marketed.
Yeah.
And his project was to make it free.
Yeah. Yes, I think the whole idea that it was or people or profit, that we all know that's no longer a choice that has to be made, that they can go hand in hand. It's the so-called double bottom line.
Yes.
Could you elaborate a bit on that? Why is that so important?
Well, we have seen a major shift since 40 years ago. You know, there was a guy, and you can look this up on Wikipedia, called Friedman. The guy won the Nobel Prize of Economics in 1976. And he made a bold statement. He was one of the founders of the so-called Chicago School. And he made a statement that the business of business was to make business, which means that shareholders should only focus on making money. And today, what do we see? We see that most companies take a broader angle and decide not only to make money, but also to create an interface with all stakeholders. And ultimately, a company should factor in all externalities. That's the double profit line. So making money is one thing because the company has one purpose and it should entertain the wealth of the workers and the shareholders, but also to take into consideration all the parties surrounding the company, including the public services, including the government, including the nature, which is something that is often looked at.
Yeah. Indeed, we see that a lot of entrepreneurs and businesses are urged to stand still on the role they have to overcome the many societal challenges we're facing today. We also see that leading and influential financial institutes like, for example, BlackRock, also explicitly start to encourage us to take it to that next level of responsibility. And I want to add a quote from the annual letter of the BlackRock's CEO, Harry Fink. He wrote in his latest letter, something I would like to quote here tonight. I'm an optimist, a bit like Jimmy Wales. I'm encouraged by what I see from businesses, and now business leaders and boards will need to show great courage and commitment to their stakeholders. We need to move even faster to create more jobs, more prosperity, more inclusivity. I have great confidence in the ability of businesses to help move us out of this crisis and build a more inclusive capitalism. That's an interesting statement. What's your point of view on that statement?
Well, this inclusive capitalism is kind of the purpose of the growth Peter Kam. And I would say that capitalism is a moving target. It was really created by the Industrial Revolution, something like 200 years ago. And today we see that all is about taking into consideration climate change, being socially responsible, which means that a new form of capitalism is emerging. And the Grove Peter Kam is right in that spot. When we decided to revisit the DNA of the company, because we are celebrating today 150 years of activity, the purpose was to find back the roots, the DNA, the legend of the company. And everywhere since the start of the company, we have entertained an inclusive capitalism. We are a company of entrepreneurs. And definitely, I feel quite comfortable with this statement of the BlackRock CEO, yes.
Yeah, you're mentioning indeed the word purpose. It's something we hear more and more about, that the importance of having a company purpose. You also worked on that. It's a goal that goes beyond profit, the relevance you have as a company in order to guide it into the future. What exactly is the purpose of your company?
The purpose of the company is to stimulate innovation, creativity, to be a partner, to partner with the clients, to make sure that we can bring something positive to the community, to the society as a whole. And when you mention, rightfully so, that a company is not just about making money, you're right on that, because people today do not want to work for a company that has no purpose, except getting a paycheck at the end of the month. So definitely, when we see the company, the Grove Peter Kam, we were there at the start of the Industrial Revolution. The company went through 3 wars, which is quite amazing.
Yes.
It's still in business today, one of the most reputable financial institutions. And this does not happen by coincidence. It happens because the legend, the soul of the company is being taken over generation after generation by people who want to keep the fire of the pioneers of the company.
So you think your company is now ready for the next 150 years?
Definitely, because going through the roots of the company is one thing, making sure that we have today values, that we have a business that can go through the next 150 years is another story. And we are working on that. And the whole communication, the whole reality of the company is about the next 150 years. years.
Yes. You also made a little movie on that idea of purpose. Maybe we can take a look at it.
De Groot Petercam wasn't built in one day. Exactly 150 years ago, in 1871, our story began. Ever since, we have been here, protecting what families built, while making a mark on our economy. We continue to write our story, generation after generation, with a very ambitious role to play, to create responsible prosperity for all, by opening doors to opportunities and accompanying our clients with expertise. Our impact goes beyond generating profit. We want society at large to benefit from our work, because we have the power to invest consciously. What the future will bring, nobody knows. But we strongly believe that our achievements will outlive us, and that we'll be here to guide your grandchildren into the future. That's the whole idea. Because our work has no finish line. De Groot Petercam. Imagine tomorrow since 1871.
Yeah, I think that's one of your known taglines, Imagine Tomorrow. Does that make you proud to watch that movie?
Oh, definitely.
I see the look on your face.
I'm upset when I see that, because it's a moving thing, yes.
Yeah. And do you really have the feeling that all the people working at the Groot Petercam also really have that in them, that they also have that feeling?
They do, and let me put it this way. You know, when we started to face this COVID crisis, we could feel, touch the will of the people to stay together, to continue to contribute to this project, and it's still the case today. I'm extremely proud to be the CEO of this company. Definitely.
Do you indeed have the idea that because of the whole pandemic we're in, that more and more people are aware of the role we have to play in society?
Definitely, because they realize that working for a company is not just going to the office. It's also entertaining a network of a community of people who want to work together. And it's also moving to think that these people are working remote today, that one day they will come back to the office, and we will celebrate that day, definitely.
Yeah, that will be a great day to celebrate. The bank is ready for the next 150 years. I have the impression you too?
I am.
Okay, let's take a note on that, and maybe we'll see again, maybe not in 150 years, so that's quite some time. I mean, Jimmy Wales and Carl Fussman also want to see each other again in 100 years, but maybe we can see each other a bit sooner. That would be a great thing to do. May I thank you very much for this candid interview, Mr. Coleman. And that brings us a bit to the end of this session here tonight. And with these final thoughts, I would like to thank you all for tuning in with us here tonight. And I hope it gave some purpose to you all, and I hope also some inspiration. The bank will keep you informed on other events celebrating the Groot Petercam's 150th birthday. And for now, I wish you all a good night's sleep and some bright ideas. Bye-bye.